Story 1. I work as a warehouse stock person in an electronics store. Basically, I go around to every shelf in the departments and make sure the products are in the place they should be. It's a pretty easy job, especially since I clock in and clock out before the store opens, so I never interact with customers, until today. It was a pretty typical morning of checking off the shelf products when I heard someone loudly banging on the locked front doors. I could hear it all the way from the back of the store, where I was wrapping a security tag onto an Xbox One X important for later. While carrying the Xbox, I walked into view of the doors and saw a woman, probably in her 30s, banging her fist on the glass. I noticed she was wearing a jacket with the store's colors on it, so I assumed she was a co-worker. She stopped banging when she saw me and waved hello. Remember, I only work the early morning shifts before opening, so I never interact with customers. However, I also don't know all of my other co-workers who work regular store hours. I thought to myself, oh, she must be one of the sales representatives, because they often come in 30 minutes early if they have an opening shift. It was around 40 minutes until opening, so it didn't raise any red flags for me. I walked up to the front doors. There are 2 sets of them with a vestibule in between. The first set opens to the outside and lets you into the vestibule. The second set opens from the vestibule and lets you into the store. The woman was standing outside. I took the Xbox I was holding and placed it on the register counter nearest to the doors. I unlocked the second set of doors and stepped up to the first set to begin pushing it open when the woman shoved her body through the opening of the doors. I guess waiting 2 whole seconds for me to finish opening the door was too much for her. She had already passed through the second set of doors and was walking into the store by the time I finished closing and locking both sets. She wasn't walking to a register to clock in, and she wasn't walking directly to any department. All she did was quickly look around the store before turning back to me and saying, "Where is your game section? I'm looking for a Switch." My heart dropped. She was a customer that I had accidentally let into the store before opening. Big mistake. I started to internally panic a little, but thought to myself that all I needed to do was get her out of the store. Me? "I'm sorry, ma'am, but we don't open for another 40 minutes. I thought you were one of my co-workers when I let you in." The woman rolled her eyes and said, "The website says you open at 8 am. It's 8:20. Me? "Our website says 9 am. I'm telling you it's 9 am. You need to leave." "Woman, I only need to buy a Switch. I'll be 10 minutes. She began to walk further into the store when I stepped into her path. Me? "You can buy whatever you want at 9 am. But right now, you need to leave." The woman started getting agitated and said, "I want to speak to your manager right now." At that point, I was the only one working in the warehouse that morning. We were really understaffed, but there was a supervisor in the back office doing paperwork. The supervisor is a really understanding person, so I knew he wouldn't get mad at me for letting this woman in by mistake. But I made the unwise decision to handle this myself. Me. "I am the only one here. Now, please leave." This is a good time to mention that I'm a 5'3", 110-pound woman who looks like a 15-year-old, even though I'm actually in my 20s. I do not look intimidating in any way. The woman got a smug look on her face and said, "Fine, I'll go." She started walking toward the doors, and I thought that was the end of it until she grabbed the Xbox off of the counter and tried to unlock the doors. I rushed up to her and began tugging at the Xbox while yelling at her to let go and "I will call the police." The Xbox was wrapped in a security tag, so the entire time this tug of war was happening, the door alarms were blaring because of the tag. My supervisor heard the alarm and came out of the back office to find me struggling with this completely unreasonable woman. He came over to help, but not before she punched me hard in the stomach. I let go of the Xbox and grabbed my stomach in pain. She still didn't have the door unlocked, but the punch was strong enough that I ended up getting sick right on her and the Xbox. She dropped the Xbox and went to hit me again, but this time I saw it coming. I mustered up all my strength and frustration and kicked her square in the chest. I might not look strong, but I definitely can be when I need to be. That said, I only had the energy for that one good kick. I curled up on the floor afterward, agonizing over the pain from her earlier hit. My supervisor called the police while the woman whined in pain and was still trying to unlock the door. I guess she didn't realize that keys are required to open those doors. Story 2. So, little backstory: when I was in high school, I used to work for one of the biggest supermarket chains in my country. This chain has certain rules so shoppers would come there more often. One of those rules is that when other registers can be used but aren't, and you are the fourth person waiting in line. Note, this is important. You get your groceries for free. Side note, this is a literal hell to work with at times. So I usually work the main desk area, but occasionally did the normal register, if people called in sick or it suddenly got busy. So I come in and my manager Bobby tells me it's unexpectedly busy and if I would mind taking over register 1 for 20 minutes, so my colleague can take her break. I head over to the register and help a very friendly young man, then enter the Karen. "Good morning, ma'am." I start scanning her groceries, but then she goes, "Why are you scanning them? I should get them for free." "Excuse me, ma'am, I don't know what you're talking about." Karen, already raising her voice in a super busy store. "I was the fourth in line, so I get my groceries for free." "Sorry, ma'am, I just started my shift, and when I got to the register, you weren't the fourth customer in line. I deserve my groceries for free." "Sorry, I am not authorized to give them to you free as our company's policy stat." "Do you not even know how to do your own damn job?" "Ma'am, if you want I can get the store manager, and he can look at the security footage to see if you were the fourth waiting in line." "No, I am very busy, so I'll just pay." So I ring her up as normal and wish her a nice day and continue with my work. About an hour later, Bobby calls me into his office. "A customer just called and complained that you overcharged them and didn't give them the discount they had." Because of course Karens live in their own bubble. So I explained to Bobby what happened, and he gets the security footage, and as I expected, there was the fourth person in the line, but only the third waiting. So Bobby calls the customer. "Hello, ma'am, this is Bobby from store name. You called earlier about a complaint regarding one of our employees." "Yes, I want my money back right now." "I am sorry, ma'am, but we reviewed the security footage, and unfortunately, you were not the fourth customer in line waiting. But we can offer you a complimentary flower arrangement from our flower shop. Mind you, these were usually 8 to 14 euros. I demand my money refunded. I know I was the fourth in line. I don't need your stupid flowers. I have hay fever. Don't you people ever think of anything?" Bobby decides that to just shut her up and don't make this into a big deal. The department had already been in trouble, a lot due to crappy coworkers. He'd refund her the money to her against store policy, but she had to come pick it up as cash because she paid in cash, and he can't just transfer company funds. So this lady, who was supposedly too busy to wait for me to call Bobby in the first place, drives back to the store, which I found out through coworkers who live in the same town, as she was a 20 minutes drive, to pick up her refund. And now the worst part of all, her total was just €2.80. Yeah, no kidding, so that drive too is alone, with parking already cost her double the amount she wanted back. To clarify why Bobby offered an arrangement that was worth more than her total was because every week we throw away a lot of the arrangements, and because of waste prevention, we are allowed to give them away at the end of the week if people have any complaints or problems, to keep a good customer satisfaction rate. Story 3. Hello all, hope you are doing well during these unknown and uncertain times. I hope you are all finding the best out of the current situation. So here's my story of what happened to me a few months ago. This was before everything sparked up and went to pandemonium. I love wrestling, and whenever there is a wrestling event on, I'll try to buy something for the night, like sweets, because wrestling events are really late in the place I live, England. So I walked down to my local Wilko on a Monday, a British shop which sells all types of things ranging from calculators to wallpapers. But most importantly for me, sweets. My favorite type of sweets are called pick and mix. You get a cup and fill it up with different types of sweets in different pots. You can pick which sweets you want basically. Quite cool, and I'm sure most British people on this subreddit will know what I'm talking about. So I picked up my cup and left the store and waited at the traffic lights to walk home. It's not a long distance, so walking is best for me. But as I'm at the lights, waiting for them to turn for me walk, I see an entitled mother and her son next to me, and this is what I hear. Entitled kid, "Mummy, could I have some sweeties?" He says this while looking at my cup. Entitled mother, "Okay, sweetie, Mummy will just talk to the boy real quick." She then turned to me. "Could my child have one of your sweets?" Me, "No, your child should never take candy from a stranger no matter what. What if he has allergies to the sweet? I'm sure he won't, so just hand it over." "Why should I? I spent my money on this, and I don't want to be liable if your child has a reaction to it. For all you know, I could have poisoned them." By this point, the lights have already passed and gone back to red. I should have left looking back on it now while the light was green. The entitled mother then proceeded to try to take the cup out of my hands. I prevented her and pulled back, making the entitled mother stumble backwards and almost fall to the floor. I'm not small by any means, but not big either, so I was actually quite shocked about it. She then tried for a second time, and yet again I prevented her. But this time she actually fell back to the floor, while her son looked on in disbelief. What happened next was kind of a blur, but I will try to recount it in the best way possible. What I heard next was the mother scream, "This pervert is trying to molest my child and poison him. Somebody call the police." I looked at her shocked, and her child started screaming alongside her. By this point there was quite a scene being made, and people almost felt like they closed in on me. This is where it became a blur. I think it was a man who asked me, "Man, sir, is this true?" Me, "No, obviously not. She tried to steal my sweets for her child." Entitled mother, "He's lying. He said he might have poisoned the sweets and said he wanted to molest him." I then saw the man pull out his phone to call 999. But just then everything became clear. There was a man in a bandana who I will call my guy for this story. My guy, "Ma'am, I was on the other side of the street and saw the whole thing. The kid was just using self-defense because you tried to rob him of his sweets. He didn't want to do anything to you or your child." Entitled mother then turned to the guy on the phone. "That's not true. Tell the police my side of the story." Guy, on phone to police, "Hello, I want to report an incident down in my town name." The mother gave me a grim look and I was horrified. But just then, still on the phone, the guy said, "Yes, this mother just tried to rob this child of some sweets that he brought." The mom went white. She ran away with her child, who through all of this was still throwing a tantrum. The guy on the phone then turned back to me with a huge grin on his face. He then showed me his phone. It was never on, and it turns out he never actually called the police and just pretended to. This made the mother run away and leave me be. God damn, that guy was a good actor. I thanked both of them, my guy especially, and I then walked home with a sense of victory. And let me tell you that those pick and mixes tasted 10 times sweeter that day. Story 4. Entitled man spits on volunteer driver and gets shoved after punching him during pandemic chaos. Okay, well, back during the first wave of the COVID-19 pandemic, when everyone was frantically scrambling for supplies, I volunteered to be a driver for the trucks delivering essential goods to the hospitals around my city. I'm not naming the city for obvious reasons, but I will say I'm located in Australia. My job involved driving designated routes and dropping off supplies such as, but not limited to, hand sanitizer, medical gloves, masks, hospital-grade disinfectant, and other critical items. As you can imagine, these were exactly the types of things people were going absolutely wild trying to get their hands on. For the first week or so, everything went smoothly. But after a while, people began to realize what was in the back of my truck and the trucks driven by the other volunteers. One day, I arrived at my first drop-off location after loading up. There was a small group of about 10 people waiting right beside the dock. I pulled in and started to prepare for unloading, but as soon as the truck stopped, they all swarmed the driver's side door, demanding the supplies I had. I politely asked them to back off. The things they shouted included, and I quote, "We know you've got sanitizer in there. Give it to me, give it to us. You're a selfish jerk. Give us the supplies now." These are just a couple of examples. I told them all no and asked them to move away from the truck, as they were completely ignoring the social distancing regulations. This sort of behavior started happening at every stop I made and at every hospital I tried to deliver to. After about a week of this madness, things began to escalate. The people waiting around the drop points were getting angrier, probably out of panic. One time, while I was unloading the truck, a few individuals actually tried to steal boxes straight from the back. No, none of them got away with anything, as I was standing right there and was able to grab the boxes back easily. Incidents like this kept happening and became so frequent that I had to start unloading one box at a time. I couldn't leave the back door open anymore. I would take out 3 boxes, close and lock the door, deliver them, then repeat the process. Each hospital received around 30 boxes of various supplies per week, so you can imagine how frustrating and exhausting this became thanks to the constant disruptions. Yes, I did report it to the people in charge, but they told me they didn't have the manpower to assign another person to help, so I was stuck dealing with this on my own. As the weeks went on, the crowd's behavior grew even more aggressive. One day, I arrived at a hospital and encountered what had become the usual crowd, now around 30 to 40 people. As soon as I got out of the truck, they started shouting and demanding things. I went through my usual response. "These supplies are for the hospital, and I can't give them to anyone else," and so on. Then, out of nowhere, one man just punched me directly in the face. I was so shocked that it didn't quite register at first, but once it did, I was absolutely furious. Thankfully, there was a security guard doing a patrol at the hospital loading dock who witnessed the entire thing and quickly restrained the man before I lost my temper completely. Honestly, if the guard hadn't stepped in, I don't know what I might have done. The man was arrested and charged. The organization I was volunteering for pressed charges on my behalf, since I was one of their official volunteers. After that incident, I became a lot more cautious and defensive around these entitled, irrational individuals. Then everything came to a head one Thursday morning. I had left the depot to begin my route and decided to change up my delivery order. Instead of following the usual pattern of going to Hospital 1, then Hospital 2, then Hospital 3, I switched it up. I decided to go to Hospital 2 first, then 1, then 3. At first, it worked. I managed to avoid the crowd for a few days, but eventually they must have caught on because they started waiting at each hospital in smaller groups. That brings us to this particular Thursday morning at exactly 7 a.m. I pulled up to Hospital 3, got out of the truck, and began unpacking. Then, sure enough, a group of around 15 angry and entitled individuals showed up. They immediately began berating me for trying to elude them and depriving their precious children of the supplies they desperately needed, and on it went. By this point, I had learned it was best to just ignore the shouting and focus on getting my deliveries done as quickly as possible. But then, one particularly aggressive couple got in my face, shouting insults and calling me things like a horrible, disgusting, greedy person. And then it happened. The man spat on me. I stood there completely stunned for a second or two, staring at the half-smug, half-angry look on his face, and I lost it. I grabbed him and shoved him back roughly 2 meters. I stood over him and shouted, "Do that again, and you'll be introducing your face to the pavement multiple times, understood?" He scrambled to his feet and started yelling that I had assaulted him. I simply pointed to the rear dash camera mounted on the truck and said, "Go ahead and call the police. I can have that footage downloaded and submitted within 10 minutes. That shut him up completely. The crowd quickly dispersed after that, and I resumed unloading the supplies. I informed the nurse who accepted the deliveries about what had just happened. She was horrified and insisted that I not leave until I underwent a COVID test and had my face and surrounding areas professionally sanitized. And that was it. Nothing quite as extreme happened again after that. About 3 weeks later, the government officially took over the hospital supply duties, and I was thanked several times for my service and dedication during that chaotic period. Thanks for reading. I know this was a long one, but I hope it gave you a little insight into how some of us were treated during the early stages of the pandemic. Thanks again, and I hope you have a great day or night wherever you are. Story 5. Note this was pre-quarantine where I live, back in February 2020 to be precise. Some backstory: I work in a resort, in the gift shop, I know, retail. I'm one of the workers that runs our magic scavenger hunt game. It's a lot of fun, and I really do love my job. I get to walk the floors of the game and help people playing it and explain the game to everyone and dress up in costumes. It's a lot of fun. Around the hallways of the resort, in our game area, we have chests which you use wands to open, sensors and stuff. But a lot of the time, kids like to force chests open with their hands when they don't open for whatever reason. We always have to tell kids not to do that because when forced open like that, it breaks the chest, and they like to slam shut on fingers. I've gotten my fingers caught in them because I tend to stick my hand in there to stop it from slamming shut on the kids' hands, but on my poor hands instead, and let me tell you it hurts. One day, I was floor walking and helping people out with the game, the usual, when I see a little girl, maybe about 2-3, forcing a chest open. Now the chest slamming shut on my adult hands hurts like hell. But I can't even imagine what it would do to little toddler hands. Like I imagine broken fingers maybe, not sure, but they have little fingers. At the very least it would be very painful and possibly ruin their vacation at the resort. So as per usual, I hurry over and hook my hand under the lid of the chest to keep it from slamming shut. Me. No, we shouldn't do that. I wouldn't want you to get hurt. As gently as possible, she was a toddler after all. The little girl nodded and started walking towards her mom, who definitely wasn't an entitled parent. It was the dad, entitled dad, who comes storming over. I had just finished closing the chest lid gently, didn't want to get my hands stuck, and turned around when he's inches from my face. He literally had me cornered between the side of the chest and the wall. Entitled dad, don't you dare tell my daughter what to do. You scared her. I didn't, by the way. She was perfectly fine until her dad started yelling. Then she started to cry and hide behind her mom. Side note, this man was very tall, like 6 feet tall, and I am not a tall person, so a tall man who has me trapped against the wall because the chest sits against the wall making it a corner is very scary to me. But sir, she could have gotten hurt. Entitled dad, that's for me to tell her, not you. You're not her parent. By this point, other families in the hallway were watching, and I was close to crying. Not that it's hard to make me cry. The crying girl's nice mom, honey, leave him alone. Let's just go to our room. Entitled dad, completely ignoring her. Mind your own damn business and leave the parenting to the actual parents. We'll tell her what she can and can't do. Terrified, trembling, and trying to keep from crying, I say, I'm sorry. He stormed off down the hall, and I was left there shaking and trying not to cry. I could see other families gathered near the entrance of the hallway watching, trying to put on a brave face. I started walking their way so I could head downstairs to the gift shop. The families near the entrance were super nice, telling me that I was just doing my job and that he was being a jerk. I thanked them all and put on fake smiles, but I went downstairs and ended up crying in the back room until one of my managers found me and made me sit down and tell them what happened. It wasn't a good day. They ended up sending me home a bit early. I only had an hour left in my shift, and I was just glad I wasn't working the next day. I did not want to run into that guy again. Story 6. This slow burn started a full 1.5 years before my plan came into effect. Earlier in the year, my dad quite sensibly suggested that with the size of our family Christmas party, we skip a generation with gifts to ease the financial strain as the extended family grew. At the time I was struggling with my business and athletic career, and my wife, then girlfriend, was working on her second master's degree. so I suggested names from a hat. But he wanted to spoil all his grandchildren. I said fair enough. I'll chip in for Oma's cruise and buy gifts for my step-siblings. But don't expect anything grand. Dramatis personae for that Christmas party. Me, 28-year-old, at the time, heavyweight mixed martial artist and strength coach. Also known as a small-time athlete working a day job to barely make rent in addition to training full-time. Martha, stepsister, 40-ish. An aging mombi whose only assets are starting to sag too much for them to be assets anymore, leaving her with no other definable personality traits. Jane, my oldest niece 12, stepsister's daughter. Imagine the most vapid teenager stereotype you can and multiply it by 1,000. Tim, my oldest nephew 9, stepsister's son, living proof that you're never too young to be a jerk. Robert, stepbrother, 36, formerly cool dude who gave up on life when his kids were born. Years later would gain back enough willpower and gumption to physically assault his wife. Tammy, 6 bros, daughter, sweet and shy girl, terrified by my mere presence, the wisest of the bunch in my opinion. Bubba, 7 bros, son, a generally nice kid who at this time was partway into evolving into a jerk after being constantly told to look up to and emulate Thing 2. Tammy has brought a Nintendo DS and all the kids are struggling to play it together, so I foolishly offer to loan them mine to lighten the load. Tammy agrees to share with Jane and Bubba agrees to share with Tim. Having stupidly deprived myself of my means to escape social obligations, I go to the living room to acquire that much older cure for not wanting to deal with other people: alcohol. Not even having had time to pour a dram, my trained ear picks up from the kids' room the unmistakable sound of one human being pummeling another. I politely suggest to Robert that he might want to go have a look, but bro hasn't given 2 craps about anything in about 7 years, so he waves it off and I go to investigate. I walk in to see that Tim may be a jerk, but is not untalented, and is managing to strike, shove into a wall and kick Bubba all at the same time, while attempting to play my DS with his other hand. Having decided his turn began the moment I left the room. Jane has simply wrested the DS from Tammy, who is now sitting in the corner crying. I shout for Martha, informing her that if she doesn't get in here to break things up before I count to 10, I would have a stern conversation with them. She turns up and separates the kids and I retrieve my DS. Instead of giving Tim a lesson on sharing and not hitting people, she proceeds to berate Bubba, the kid who was beaten, for not simply giving up the DS to her little piece of crap and making her son look bad. Jane simply lets out a tweenage sigh for the ages and tosses the other DS into the crying Tammy. I then excuse myself from the party, thanking whatever gods may be that I don't have to provide gifts for any of those little kids. 6 months later, my firm belief in atheism is confirmed as bro calls me, and this conversation ensues. Hey elbow smash, while I really appreciated the gifts last year, you should really get something for the kids this year instead. Christmas is all about the children after all. No, I turn up to chat with you and Dad and Oma. I really don't give 2 craps about the kids. That's a mean thing to say about my kids. Don't you care about them? You cared about them so much that at the last party, you couldn't be bothered to break up a fight where your son was being beaten bloody. Tim is a good kid. Martha said he just had a bad day. He was literally beating your child. You didn't put pics on social media for a week because of the bruises. If Tim were an adult and had that kind of bad day, I'd have had a stern conversation with him and convinced him peacefully to lay on the floor until the police arrived. Well, stepsis and I were talking, and we think you should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of us. Well, I'm happy not to buy you anything, but I'm not getting crap for Martha's little kids, especially when she encourages that behavior. Well, if you aren't going to get something for all the kids, you shouldn't get anything at all. It's not right if you don't treat them equally. Done. Now I'm sure they wish it has been this simple, but unfortunately it wasn't, and I certainly wouldn't have written such a long-winded story if that were the payoff. Thanks for bearing with me so far. We're almost at the end. A few months later, about 2 weeks before Christmas, I got an email from my dad with links to various toys. mostly from Toys R Us, which still existed at the time. When I call him back to ask what that's all about, this conversation ensues. "Hey, what's up? I got your email. What's that all about?" "Those are gifts for the kids for Christmas." "That's cool if you're getting them that. I'll see them when the kids open them." "No, that's for you to get them. I don't buy for that generation, remember? And I already sent you my contribution to Oma's cruise. You need to get stuff for the kids. Don't you want them to look up to you as an uncle?" "Not really. Also, what part of my life suggests to you that they ought to look up to me as any sort of role model? You'd be better off telling them to grow up to be rock stars." "Not the point. Christmas is all about the children. If you don't get them this stuff, I won't put your name on the card for Oma." "That's a crappy thing to do, considering I already paid into that." "Will you get the stuff or not?" "Well, guess my name isn't going on the card then. This will cost me more than a month's rent, so you can take this list and grease it up real nice." Dad, interrupting me, then saying, "Calm your jets. This is what they want." "I'll get them a token something, but I'm not taking out a loan." "Fine, just make it something they enjoy. If what I get doesn't put a giant smile on each and every one of their faces, I'll buy you dinner at a steakhouse of your choosing." "That's the spirit. Talk to you later." So, Christmas rolls around and my wife and I have bought not just one, but 4 gifts for each of the little ones and wrapped them all beautifully. My dad, correctly, assumes it's all probably from the dollar store, but it's nicely wrapped and he gives me a look of approval as I place it under the tree. My wife and I schmooze for a bit and then suggest that since we brought several gifts for each of the kids, why don't they open one each before dinner so they have something to do while they wait? Their parents of course agree, as it gives them more of a reason to ignore their kids and talk about them instead. So they send us off to hand out gifts to their kids. Martha is looking especially smug. As they begin to unwrap them, I prepare the camera as my wife goes for our coats, and I stick around just long enough to immortalize on film the big grin on each of the kids' faces as they see what their gift is. Less than 1 minute later, the first blast from the air horn, Tim's gift, can be heard in the hallway clearly by my wife and I as we make our way to the elevator. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of silly string, Tammy's gift, or the 36 rainbow packs of off-brand Sharpies, Bubba's gift, ended up on the walls, but I do know they repainted the place the next month. Whether or not the pile of slap-on bracelets we got for Jane ended up on the wrists and legs of the parents, as they tried to contain the other 3, will be left to the imagination. But I like to think they all ended up in the height of 80s fashion before Boxing Day. I may never know if they opened the rest of their presents. Everyone got a copy of each of the other's gifts, for fairness, plus a bunch of gross and mildly inappropriate temporary tattoos. In the confusion, none of them noticed either me or my wife leaving. I'm certain at some point they did notice the pretty gold envelope addressed to the parents on the tree. Inside was a very pretty card, blank but for the following note. This was a warning shot from off the top of my head. I've got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas, E. I never bought anyone steak dinner. However, I enjoyed several more Christmases with my Oma and Dad until they passed, and I stopped seeing that side of the family at all. No mention of this incident or gifts for the kids was ever made again.